Hello again. This is another little analysis of a video from a music YouTuber, Mary Spender. I've been following her for about 2, 3 years now. Watched a lot of her videos. This is in regards to her most recent one that she posted, I believe, either today or yesterday, talking about how there's a huge problem with mental health when it comes to the music industry. So I just want to share a little bit about my experiences on that. First off, you could probably see by the hat that I'm wearing because I didn't mess with my hair. I'm a veteran, so I have some mental health issues related to that. But years, and I mean years, almost a decade before I was in the military, I was a touring musician. And I'm going to go through a little bit about my background real quick just to kind of like touch on how pervasive this problem is and how it's affected me almost a decade after I've been out of the music industry almost completely. So we'll kind of take it back a little bit. I started playing out in shows when I was a junior in high school. So I have a family history of musicians, and I was very fortunate to be able to get into bars at a younger than legal age to go in and do some of these shows. So I kind of had some hands on experience doing stuff very early on. And I kind of saw how the toll was already taking itself when it comes to just a, a small venue of setting up. 9 out of 10 times when you're in a small band, you're not really capable of having the whole production. So it's up to you to show up early, do all these things, and that in itself already kind of affects you, right? Not only do you have to give a good performance, but you have to make sure you don't you know burn yourself out before you play. And if you did kind of go over and above and put on a good show, then you have to still have the energy, both physically and mentally, after to clean up and drop it back off, right? So that's already kind of like on the small scale, all the extra stuff that you have to give. All right. So my father used to book gigs for my uncle and his band, and my dad would kind of do it passively. It more was just my dad and my uncle had just kind of played in so many different venues. They knew so many people, and my dad was also a recording a guy, so like he was getting a lot of contacts for gigs and stuff. So he dropped doing that very quickly in like the late 90s. I think he'd only done it for like 5 or 6 years, and he was really only booking like his band and my uncle's band. So even when you're like on the small scale of like the booking aspect or the ad aspect, all of that stuff in the 90s was still pretty brutal and hard. And he just got burnt out with it. And he's like, screw this stuff. He occasionally would book gigs in the 2000s for my uncle. He stopped playing music altogether and kind of focused more on the recording aspect and kind of set up his own home studio. So he kind of recovered a little bit. And then that's kind of when I was growing up and I was learning all these things, right? So now we fast forward a little bit. I'm in my early 20s. I've been playing shows, I've been playing in a bunch of different bands, and finally I have the confidence to start my own blues trio. Been writing songs for since my freshman year, so maybe 5 years at that point. And each song, the process was getting better, more fluid, the music was getting better, my musicianship was getting better, and I finally had the right set of people to kind of take this project on. It wasn't supposed to be a trio originally, but just some other aspects of the mental health thing. I stupidly let my drummer's girlfriend be our guitarist for a while, and that caused some issues, and then I almost had to like kick out not just her but my drummer, and it really sucked. But he was a solid drummer, and he was also a recording guy, and I passively knew how to do some audio engineering because my dad had taught me. But I didn't really know exactly musically what I wanted. He was going to school for that. So between the both of us, we were both able to kind of really do what we wanted to do sonically and like obviously musically. Um, so that was already kind of a mental drain. But we crossed that hurdle. As we started playing more shows, our bassist happened to be in a play with a guy who was starting his own comedy show, and it got picked up by cable network. So we were one of the first bands. In fact, actually, when I think about it, we were the first band on his show, and we ended up recording, I think, 4 or 5 songs to be circulated in later episodes, just on the off chance that he couldn't find other bands, or we were gonna talk about being his like actual band, kind of like like a Tonight Show type deal. Um, I don't really know what ended up happening with that. I know for a fact one of our initial one we recorded live and was played on TV, and he used another one of our songs, but I can't remember which one. So that was really cool, and that kind of like propelled us a lot further faster than we would have probably had otherwise. On top of the contacts my dad and my uncle had made, we were able to go and do stuff, and like we were really taking off. Then we started working for one of Chicago's main talent agencies. I'm not going to name it, but you'll probably figure out who it is. Um, we had some bad luck with that. I don't want to get too much into it, but I'm going to just put it this way. There is a family history of issues with that talent agency, and specifically a person who works at it. And when that person found out that I was related to some people he had problems with, it ended up coming down on me. And this happened right when we did our album release. We had recorded it like basically as quick as the Beatles did Please Please Me. We had all these songs, we've been playing them, so it wasn't hard to record. We just wanted to get something out there, and this was supposed to be our thing to shop around with this talent agency to get these labels interested in us. At the time, we had two labels kind of interested, talking with us, kind of getting things going. Both of them were through that talent agency, though. So as soon as we started having some issues with the talent agency, and we had a job, or we had a venue gig go bad, like it like very quickly put me on the track of failure. And I found out actually about a year later that we ended up getting blacklisted, and it like really made it hard for us to find shows. So the band kind of dissolved. I wasn't able to work things out with my bassist, and my drummer decided that he really wanted to end up being in a Beatles tribute band, and he ended up actually getting in there. Like he's in one of the top Beatles tribute bands. Me and the bassist had a falling out, and like he absolutely hates me, and he has every right to do it, because I was still running my band basically like a business. And there was a second iteration. We changed our name, and we kind of modernized a little bit more than just blues. It was kind of more like, I qualified it as modern blues, and that kind of fizzled out. So I was already feeling very motivated in the sense of, well, I've already kind of got to this level of success. It's only going to be easier to get to the next level or to restart, because I know all the mistakes I made, but I didn't have the luck. I didn't have the resources that I did the first time. And I was able to kind of power through that. I started being a session musician. My brother, who's also a musician, he needed me to do drums for a handful of things. I started talking with a guy who owned his own studio. I filled in a couple of times with some things, and it helped me spread around a little bit. So now I was starting to get on other people's work. I was bouncing between a whole bunch of other bands, and then some of these bands were actually getting signed, and they were going somewhere. So I'm like, awesome. I'm around a group of people who are clearly skilled enough to get somewhere and do something. But as I stopped getting these calls for the session work, and I started not playing as many gigs with my own music, it slowly started creeping in that my time had passed. And this was 1 year after basically 3 years of progress, getting to where I wanted to go, having realistic expectations, and then like it all kind of crashing down. So like I was basically a year into denial after all this had happened. Um, that was kind of about the time that I decided to join the U.S. Navy, and ended up basically just stopping music for about a year and a half, because I didn't realize just how much that had affected me. In fact, almost 10 years now, because this happened in 2012 to 2013. No, 2011 to 2013. Yeah. So we're on the 10-year anniversary basically of when my band had imploded, and I realized my music career had died. And that's exactly what had happened. It had died. Through a series of unfortunate events and poor decisions, both on my behalf and others, had led me to a point where I was never going to capitalize on the success that I had gotten. And it took me a very, very, very long time to get over that. Skipping over my military career for a little bit, I still felt a pull for my music while I was in. And after I got out earlier than I had anticipated, I was like, okay, well, I have some money, thankfully, because I was smart and I'd saved up. My then girlfriend, who later became my wife, she was extremely supportive of my music career. And I decided to kind of get my feet back in. I hadn't been in Illinois for a little bit since I was with the Navy, and I was doing my trainings and, my different commands and everything. And I started kind of seeing just how quickly like old wounds can be reopened. I had started doing some session stuff again, and then I was hearing all these stories from bands, and this was in 2018, so this was right before the pandemic. This was kind of where like things were still possible. You know, there was still a lot of up potential for growth, and then I was working with some guy who also had a similar story. He was from Nashville and he had just recorded an album and he was trying to capitalize on the momentum, but something had stalled. So he ended up coming back to Chicago because that's where he's from. And I was his guitarist for a little bit. And then I was kind of very surprised, but like a lot of, I played 4 shows with him and 3 of the shows were all covers. And I'm like, bro, man, like I love your album. It sounds really good. I'm here to play your album. I can understand like, since you're kind of getting your foot back in the door, like, playing like half and half or like a 60-40 type deal. But very quickly, and the second gig, I basically was like, hey, man, like if this next gig isn't like an originals, like I'm out. Because that's not what I was there for. I liked what this guy was doing. I liked how his album was recorded. And I was like, yes, this is definitely something I could do, and it just wasn't happening. I don't know why he had his flaws or mistakes or whatever he did, but just from my past experience, from my family's past experience with things, and from his stuff, I was really kind of seeing how just on the small scale, how just burnt out you can get. And that's when I finally realized, like, you know what? I cannot keep thinking about music as a business. And that's unfortunately what you have to do to be a successful musician today. Like 100%. Granted, you can do almost everything by yourself. You can do an indie label type deal. You can record everything yourself. It's not that hard. You can send the masters off to somebody and it's significantly cheaper than it used to be. You can do all your advertising yourself. You can do all your merchandising yourself. That's the benefit of technology. But at the same time, it's the discredit of it because you have to be on top of it. You have the ability to be on top of it. And if you have a good band and you have good business mentality, you'll have others to delegate tasks to, so you're not doing it completely. But that's so much extra work that you have to do in order to be successful because that's what music still is. It's a business. It's still treated like a business. It's still viewed as something that started in the 20s and 30s and it still basically ran the same. It hasn't evolved with a lot of our technology. I mean, it's incorporated streaming services, but that it hasn't utilized under the full capabilities. And maybe I'll talk about that in another video at some point. But all that being said, you have opportunities to make yourself way more successful than you did 20, 30 years ago. But you also will burn out much quicker and much harder if you don't do it the proper way and don't have a good team. And I say team because sometimes it's not just your band members who are doing that stuff. Sometimes maybe having your girlfriend help you out, having your boyfriend help you out, having your family get involved. Like my other brother, he's a musician as well, and he plays a bunch of different venues. So like he had some venue stuff that I could have utilized. He wasn't playing with me. I played with my first brother in a band together, and I helped him with some resources because I was a talent scout at the time for a label that was doing punk and ska, which is exactly what his band was. So I was literally telling him, I'm like, hey man, if you want to get somewhere, obviously I couldn't just recruit him directly to my label, but I did try. But like, here are the things that they're looking for. Here's the stuff that you need to do. There's resources you can utilize outside of your band. That's why I say team. But some of your own band members should be involved in this as well. That's what's going to mitigate some of that burnout because it's not all on you. But kind of going back to everything that Mary was talking about, this affects everyone besides the musician. It just, from what I've witnessed and from what I've seen from being on all angles, I've been an audio guy. I've been a sound engineer. I've been a lights tech. I've been a cameraman. I've been the musician up there. I've been the showman, the solo artist. I've been just a passive musician in the back. I've done it all, and I see it. And it just hurts so much because I can't tell you how many great musicians have fizzled out younger than me and won't do music anymore. And, at the turnaround, there's also me. There was a quote that Mary had said in in her most recent video that there were artists who had been dropped from their label and are still trying to pick up the pieces 10 to 15 years from now. And that really hurt me because it's fucking true for me. I'm still trying to figure out where to go with my life 10 years after some stupid bad luck bullshit ruined my mentality with music. And we can kind of go to the future, or not the future, the present. We can kind of go and talk about what I do with music now. And then I'm going to offer some tips and some suggestions to what musicians could do to help prevent it on the small scale as you work up to the high scale. All right. So I will be the first one to say I didn't play stadiums. Okay. I didn't have gold, even silver fucking album releases. All right. So if you're some high end artist and you're watching this video, like obviously the advice I'm going to give probably isn't directed towards you. Can you learn something from it? Awesome. But this is really for the people who are starting from the very bottom and maybe are kind of getting to that mid tier level where they can almost just maybe live off their career as being just a musician. So what I'm doing right now is for the last few years, all right, the pandemic has kind of delayed a lot of what I've been wanting to do, but I have stopped viewing music as a business and decided that what I kind of want to do is I want to sort of start embracing technology and the modern trends of content, not necessarily music, content. I want to release basically all of my music as I'm writing it and kind of have people have the opportunity to sort of pick and choose what they want. Almost like a choose your own adventure with an album type deal. Like, hey, you like these 6 songs and they're all from completely different time periods, make an album out of it. And I used to sell that off of my own website that I had created because I don't really like all the Spotify, the YouTube, the analytics and the algorithms. I just don't want to deal with it. I'm not that invested. If I was trying to make my music career something really big like it was 10 years ago, of course, you absolutely 100% have to do that. You have to. I'm not trying to live off of my music. I'm trying to enjoy making music again. That's what's changed for me. So just having my music out there does it for me. Do I miss doing shows? 100%. I haven't done a show virtually in 2.5 years. The last show I did was a tribute concert for my uncle who passed away because he was a huge inspiration for me. And I'm going to talk about this story really quick before I go back into everything because it really shows how, even on the small scale, this stuff can affect you, right? So my uncle was a huge inspiration for my music career. And he passed away not from the pandemic, but during the pandemic. I flew back a year after, because I was living in a different state, to do a tribute concert on the anniversary of his passing. And it was such a fucking shit show. All of the people who were still alive from his band, because these guys are kind of old, they didn't rehearse because they were all afraid about getting COVID, which, you know, granted, it's a viable thing for their age, okay? Like, however your political view is on it, for their age, as a medical, I am a medical professional, like, I get it. They have reasonable suspicion for it. But, like, they didn't rehearse at all in person, even the day before or, like, the day of. And I was asked specifically, not just by my father, but from other people in his band, to write a song for my uncle. And I did. And I'm like, hey, I can record it and send it to you guys, but I really think it would be wise for us to, you know, like play it together at least one time before the show. You know, I don't want to be that way. And this is not because of necessarily them being old. It's just, if you've not played a lot of originals, it's going to kind of strike you as a weird thing when you don't rehearse an original with somebody. That's kind of the most polite way I'm going to put that. If you have any questions on it, you can ask about it in the comment section. I'm sure someone will probably put it in a slightly better way. I just don't want to be the person to kind of flat out say it without like hurting feelings. So anyway, we didn't get a chance to do that. So the show happens and 80% of the people who were supposed to come didn't end up coming. We had a bunch of guest artists lined up. We had a song list that was basically like, hey, for this first set, these people are supposed to be here. So they're going to choose between these songs, and then the band will finish up the rest. The second set is going to be all the family members who are musicians. They're going to come up and do their thing. Then you're going to start the third set with your original, and then you're going to close out the night. That's what I was told. What ended up happening was between the first and the second set, we did my song. And then I did the very last song for the end of the show because everyone started coming after the show had already started and they were just picking and choosing songs. And people were like, oh, well, I thought you said I was going to be able to do this song. Well, you showed up 40 minutes late and someone else did that song. And then the audience didn't seem to care. The band was tired. The venue was just cramped and awful. And the audio guy wasn't having a on day. It was just a whole shit show. It really, really was. And it sucks because that was for my uncle, a man who very much inspired me. And I'm like, you guys are spitting on his fucking grave. I was so pissed off. I was literally ready to beat the shit out of everybody that fucking night. I had to bolt out several times. I just started smoking again, like maybe 2 months before. And like, I went through 2 packs that night. That's how fucking stressful it was. And I obviously got destroyed, like drunk, because I was just like, I can't handle this. It was the only way to not get in a violent situation. Anyway, going back into that though, think about that, right? Like, that's how I had to cope with such a bad show because of all the stuff going behind it. That's not healthy. That's not sustainable. And there are these musicians who have to do shitty gigs like this night after night after night. And just because they get paid a little bit more because they're on the upper echelon of things, that doesn't make it okay to do. You know, it's not okay to smoke 2 packs. It's not okay to fucking drink 20 drinks. It's not a proper sustainable coping mechanism. I say that as both a medical person and someone who's been on it and just witnessed it and experienced it. So now that story's over with, right? So I just want to release music. I don't really care much to play for venues because I know how shitty all the venues can be. So what can you do about it? Starting on the small scale, right? You have to choose venues, all right? You have to choose venues that are actually catered towards music. Now, that's very different from venues that have the capacity to play music, right? Now, we don't really all have this luxury. Sometimes you live in a very small place in a very non-music inclined area in a state that really could care less about live events. I get that. I really do. I've lived in several different states and my music career only excelled because I was in one that had a, like, you know, I mean, I lived in Chicago, so there's still a music scene, even if the music scene's not what it used to be. These venues, you're going to have to seek them out harder than you would just a normal place that has a stage. And if you don't want to do that work, okay, I get that. Sometimes you really want to start now, right? Like you got a bunch of songs and you want to play them and you want to get out there. All right, but it's going to catch up with you. So make sure at least every couple of gigs now or then, you just find somewhere that's kind of just like very laid back, very chill, but still pays you. That's a thing as well, right? We shouldn't be doing free shows. At no point in time in your career should you be doing free shows, not on the lower scale. And you're probably like, well, everyone has to do that. No, it's fucking 2023. You don't need to do that anymore. You choose to do that. But I'm going to get into that in another time period. The point is choosing your venue that is profitable for music on top of fostering music is very important. Secondly, choosing the proper bandmates. You're probably like, oh, how come you didn't do that one first? Because sometimes when you're in that small area that's not really musically inclined, you don't have a lot of choices. But when you start getting up there and higher, you need people who are reliable, people who are dedicated, and people who have other skills, right? If you don't have that team, if you don't have that group of people to help you get your music out there or distribute your merchandise or what have you, it's down to them. And they could be phenomenal bass, guitar, drummer, vocalist, whatever. But if they don't do the actual work that it is to be in a band, because like I said earlier, it's all on you. It's all on you guys to be as successful as you want to be. Guess what? I don't care how good they are. If I ask them to print off t-shirts and they keep coming up with excuses, blah, blah, blah. All right, well, you know what? You have this X deadline. You don't do it, you're out of the band. Because this is still a business, right? You fire employees who aren't contributing to the whole. That sucks. It's shitty. I wish it wasn't the case, but that is the trade-off, right? We had the ability to do all these things ourselves. And if you do it all yourself, why are you watching this video? You know what's going to happen. You're going to get burnt out. You're not going to want to do music anymore. You're going to be me wondering, how the hell am I supposed to recover from this when it's been 10 years? Don't do that. Rely on your team. Choose good bandmates who are dedicated. 3, when you start getting up there, right, and you start releasing your music, do your research, all right? Research the venues you're going to be going to when you're touring. Research all the aspects, the logistics that it comes with touring. We have Google. Figure out how much it's going to be to rent a U-Haul. Figure out where the best hotels are for your venues, all that stuff. When you start shopping yourself up to labels, make sure these labels have some variety or have that mainstream, sorry, not mainstream, bad way to put it, have that consistency, and they're not teetering, right? So if you have someone with a lot of variety, then it doesn't really matter much what you have to offer. It's all about the market demand. And they're trying out all these different people to kind of see how hard or how well everything's going to stick, right? Excuse me. If they have a consistency, right? You join a grunge label because you're a grunge band, then they're not really banking on, a band to let me rephrase this. They're banking on a band who's got that grunge aspect that has just enough pop appeal to get out there and get into the mainstream. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's good if you can deliver. It's a bad thing when all the limelight is on you, because now all these other bands aren't going to get as much focus and attention, and you got to deliver that much more better of a product. It's hard, all right, because now you're getting all these better venues, right? And it's like growing into your clothing, right? If you are trying to grow into your hand-me-downs and you keep eating, but that shirt's still a medium, like you ain't gonna fit in it long. And metaphor aside, like I've seen a lot of musicians who have gotten a lot of attention when they really weren't ready for it, and then they just fizzle out. It's like they choke on it, right? But they're not choking because they're still good musicians. It's just the pressure of shooting up. I mean, everything that comes back up goes back down, right? So sometimes we may think we're ready for that stuff, but we may not be. But if you're with a label that has some consistency, they know the ebb and flow in the market. They're going to be able to look at you guys and be like, all right, looks like you guys are trending a little bit more. This is going to be happening, blah, blah, blah. If you're with a group if you're with a label that's a variety sort of thing, then they're going to know when something's a sure thing. You're going to be really peaking up there for a considerate amount of time. It's not just going to be like, oh, one sharp thing, and then all of a sudden all the focus is on you. No, there's going to be a bit of an incline, and you'll have time to do it. If you're not going to do a label and you're going to do the indie thing, it's that much more important that you do the first two things that I was talking about. If you do end up going with the label, that third thing is critical as well. Fourth, always remember, regardless of how you do your music, it's an art. People do forget that, all right? The music that I make is just like the paintings that my wife makes. It's just like the poetry that your best friend writes, okay? The only difference is our art is performance-based, right? Yes and no. Our art is still a creative-driven thing. I will write songs that probably no one's ever going to hear. For example, my wedding song. Only 7 people have heard my wedding song. And it was all the people who were at my wedding, my wife included. I don't care if... Take that back. I would like for the people to hear that song. But when am I going to play that? What meaning is there to play a song like that? It loses it if it's not at that special moment. So I don't want to play that song out. But if music is that important to you that you want to share it with people, then make sure you're still viewing it as an art, even though you're selling it like a product. And you'll understand more what I'm talking about when you start getting to that mid-tier level, right? When you have labels coming down on you, trying to guide your direction of your album. That was one thing I didn't like. My one label, I kind of negotiated pretty hardball with, because I was like, no, I kind of know where I'm going with things. I had some analytics on my side. Digital age, we were able to utilize these things and kind of see a projection of like where our music could go if we labeled ourselves like this versus that, blah, blah, blah. It helped me a little bit, but at the same time, I was talking real big and probably should have kept my mouth shut. Did it throw me off the door completely? No, other things happened, and the label was still interested up to that point. The point is, though, even if you don't have as much creative control as you think, as long as you still keep going back to it, that music is an art as much as it is a product to be sold, you're going to be able to keep a lot of that stuff at bay. All right? Those are kind of my tips to work your way up into it. Now, what if you're like me, a sad old fuck 10 years from now, or 10 years later after their album fell apart, right? You can still do all 4 of those things. Even if you don't want to release music, even if you got burnt out from music, the I guess the number one now is just remember music is an art. Can it be a performance art? Yeah. Can it just be something you do in the basement or when you have some free time from work and you see your guitar and you want to play? Yeah, I'm looking at my guitar right now thinking about it. There's other ways to heal in that aspect, right? You're probably wondering why I'm a half hour in and now just starting to say, if you're having mental health issues, call someone, reach out to someone, talk to someone. Well, I'm still having mental health issues and I've done all those things and it doesn't help. But you know what has helped? Right now, I'm a teacher at a music school. And seeing the next generation of musicians who have yet to know anything that can happen with the real world is so rejuvenating for me because I get to show them how to play their instrument, have the passion, love, and dedication, and then I can warn them when they're of age or they're starting to progress. Be like, hey, man, this is what happened 20 years ago with me. This is what you got to look out for. Music industry hasn't changed in 20 years. It hasn't changed in 40 years since my uncle and my father started doing stuff. The only difference is the technology that we have. But that's the best thing about the younger generations, right? We care about mental health that much more. There are options, there's abilities to talk about it. I don't care who you talk about it to, as long as it's someone that you trust. If it needs to be a paid professional, please do it. Reach out to them. If you can do something like me and kind of take all that pain and that hurt and try and change it so you're guiding and helping shape the next generation, do that. But do something with your art because there is something called music therapy and it's such a magical thing. I've done it a handful of times, but you can heal from the work that you do. And even if you are the recipient of the pain and the deliverer of the art itself, just playing really makes everything that much better. There's so many different ways that you can address the mental health aspect of things. And I really hope that if there's other people like me who are struggling to kind of figure out what to do with themselves after the music career imploded, there's so many different things that you can do now that you couldn't do before. Just being an advisor, sell your services out on Fiverr or get the mental health help that you needed and talk your way through those things. Sometimes there's medical issues that you didn't even know that you had. I found out I had bipolar from part of my musical experiences. So without that and some things that had happened in my military career, I would not recognize just how much help I needed in the form of like a medication type thing. So in a way, I'm very thankful for some of the stuff that did happen in my music career and all the sleepless nights, the the low paying gigs, the low occupancy that would show up when you drive 15 hours to another state to play. Oh man, dude. Everyone's got those stories. Everyone's got those nights. That's another thing, man. Maybe just talk to another musician. Every person who's got a couple of years in the game, played with a handful of bands, their stories, they relate, man. There's that level of empathy. You guys can talk it out. Maybe grab a beer one day with one of your music buds and just relive the glory days. Whatever it is, you have the options, you have the ability. Please do it. That's kind of my whole spiel on things. I'm not trying to kind of make this music YouTube of mine kind of like uh, an extension of all these other musician YouTubers that I watch, but I think I might keep doing this because I think even if it doesn't get big, there's a lot of stuff that the lower to mid tier artists have to say. And I am definitely not calling Mary or any of the other musician YouTubers that I would do lower and mid tier. They're in a completely different thing. I'll kind of close this out by saying that Mary said something about how we need to redefine what success is for a musician, and I 100% agree with that. There's a YouTube series that I was doing when I was in, or sorry, not a YouTube series. There was a docu series that I was going to do right before the pandemic started when I was going through media school, and I got basically 2 episodes recorded before the pandemic happened, and then a lot of life things happened. I wasn't able to do it. I was going to upload it to YouTube, but it was basically me interviewing a bunch of different musicians and kind of showing people, everyday people who, or I'm sorry, It was showing musicians of varying degrees of what we would consider success, and I was marketing it towards normal people who have no idea because everyone just thinks a successful musician makes millions of dollars, tours in fucking stadiums, and platinum albums. No, that isn't that isn't it anymore. It used to be the reality. It's not. That's one way, and there are so many more now. Maybe I'll start that series up again, or at the very least, maybe I'll just release the 2 episodes that I had. Maybe not on this channel, maybe on another one. But if I ever do, I'll link it and I'll let you all know. But yeah, I think she's 100% right, and I think the YouTube thing itself is a really good way to show it. The Instagram musicians, the TikTok, all that stuff. There's so many different ways that you can be a musician and be successful today that will still affect your mental health, just not to the degree of all these other things. And maybe that's something to consider as well. Maybe we need to kind of change what being a musician is with the 2023 kind of mentality of things, right? Like 21st century, it has all these limitless opportunities. And even though things haven't been looking so good the last 10 years, or yeah, about 10 years or so, that doesn't mean things won't change eventually. So maybe we should start planning ahead. Maybe we should start kind of thinking about like, hey, do I really want to go on a tour? Do I really want to bug all these people and deal with all this bullshit? Or do I just want to, release my music, have it out there and just let it stream? And then maybe I'll have venues reach out to me and I'll get decent pay and I'll know because I'm not selling tickets how many people are going to be there and it'll be worth the time and effort. And maybe you'll have people who are motivated to work behind the scenes. You'll inspire them. Or maybe the venue will be inspired because they want you for a reason, right? Who knows? That's a bit idyllic, but that is what I hope we all want. So, thank you if you watched this entire thing. I do these pretty unedited. As you can see, I'm just kind of sitting on the couch or chair right after I watched that video, and I was like, I need to do this immediately. So, thank you very much. We'll see what's next on the horizon. Everybody take care, stay safe, and please reach out to someone if you are ever having a mental health crisis.